How many more sects of Buddhism will be discovered? How many more articulations of Shankara and of Abhinavagupta? How many new ways to worship Kali and think of Kali and experience Kali? Like, it's exciting to think that the book of religion has been written up to a point, but the pages remain blank for us to like add our own contributions based on our own way of relating to reality and our own way of then embodying reality and our own way of expressing reality.
A safe place somewhere in the woods, we can start the fire. And we all sit around the fire. We feel a little warmer now. And we all sit around the fire.
Nish, welcome to the Cosmic Conversations podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Adiji, for having me. Thank you so much.
Yes, it's great to have you on. I've been seeing your TikToks and they're really, really interesting. Maybe you want to tell people a little bit about what you do on TikTok?
Oh, that's my evil twin. That has nothing to do with me. Like, if you see a guy who looks exactly like me talking about non-duality or Tantra or Shiva or Shakti, like, I don't know who that guy is. And, like, I don't know, evil twin.
Some bilocation, yeah.
Yeah, I renounce all affiliation with such a figure who looks exactly like me and talks about Tantra on the internet. I don't know who that is. I have nothing to do with him. Don't hold me accountable.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about how you got started on the spiritual path.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think in this sense, everyone is inadvertently on the spiritual path. I was lucky in the sense that I was born into a very articulate form of spirituality called dualistic Shaiva Tantra, otherwise known as Shaiva Siddhanta. So I was born into a Tamil Shaiva family on my father's side, and I grew up in my grandfather's ashram, essentially. So I always had the example of my grandfather, a very devout Shaiva, a devotee of Lord Shiva, who was a temple singer and who performed ritual worship to Lord Shiva along tantric lines. So I always had that to look at. And I've had my parents, of course, who are, Hindus in the sense that they would take me to the temple. And so I grew up like a fish in water. I grew up within the tantric world and like absorbed it through osmosis, if you will, through my father's, my paternal Shaiva Siddhanta side. On my mom's side, I had a grandfather who I never met. He died in a temple standing before an image of Kundalini, and he died way before I was born. But he allegedly, according to my grandmother, was like a very devout Tantra practitioner, but of the Shakta persuasion. So on my mom's side, they're all Malayalis, Shaktas, worshippers of Amman or Kali. And so we have on my father's side the Shaiva Siddhanta, and of course within that there's Sri Vidya, a goddess tradition is subsumed within that Shaiva dualistic world, especially in South India. But on my mom's side we have Kali or Amman. So in that sense, I came into spirituality kind of like from the get-go because I had all these examples of Shaiva and Shakta Tantra since I was a child to like go off of.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, not everybody is, in this modern world, a lot of people are being raised atheists or agnostic. So it's nice that you got that kind of early introduction, that you have that background. It probably helps inform all the stuff that you're doing now, which is nice that you started super young. Um,
Yeah, and I got really lucky because a lot of people who are born in religious households, usually they're part of communities that are very exclusivist in their view. So they'll say like, okay, our way is the only way and our truth is the only truth and all other religions are wrong. And so people often, when they grow up in a religious and not secular context, they're like indoctrinated. I was lucky because although I was in a religious spiritual environment, my grandfather, who was my main guru at the time, of course, my like gurukula, my family guru, he never like imposed any of his views upon me. He like just taught me the text. He had me memorize some stuff, but he was always encouraging of my own interpretation. So when I would like get books that were not within our tradition, he would point out that they weren't within our tradition, but he would always encourage me in my study. And I would present theological views about God that were different from the ones that I was learning in my tradition. And he, the representative of my tradition that he was happy to admit, like maybe God is as you say. Like he was always like very tolerant and encouraging of my own, I suppose, digressions or dissensions and whatnot. So I think I had it uniquely like good because not only did I have a religious context to like be inspired by, but I also had a very liberal household that allowed me to articulate my own independent religious views within that context. So that's like very rare, I think, and I'm very grateful for that kind of upbringing.
wow, that's amazing. Um, so who is Kali? Because we're hearing the
Ah,
word Kali a lot. So who is
yes,
Kali?
yes. My biggest problem, the one who ruined my life. Let's use Abhinavagupta's definition. So Abhinavagupta, a great tantric master, is referring to the word Kali in etymological terms, and he's like defining the word using rules of etymology. So based on Ashtadhyayi's or Panini's Ashtadhyayi, like a basic Sanskrit grammar, he's just taking the word Kali and explaining what it means. So he says Kali is Pepo Jnanam Chasankyanam Gatinada iti kramat Kalanam Kali Kala Sankarshini iti abhidhiyate. So it's a simple formula to describe Kali. Kali is that goddess who projects the world into existence, is that goddess in whom the world is cognized, is that goddess in whom the world is differentiated or rather articulated. It is that goddess who appears as both simultaneity and process, that dynamism of consciousness, which is resonance, sound, word, or logos. It is that in which the world is imagined or visualized, like in the sense of the God mind in which the world appears. And most importantly, it is the devourer. Kali is the one into whom the world is reabsorbed at the end of every successive cognitive experience. Kali, therefore, is the devourer of all reality, the projector of all reality, and the site in which all reality is experienced. Kali is consciousness and the dynamism of consciousness to present itself to itself for no other reason than because it's fun to do so.
Beautiful, yeah. It's like there's different as I understand in Hinduism, I've been introduced into Ananda Marga. I don't know if you've heard of this organization. Um,
Yeah, I'm not familiar, but I've heard the name, yes.
yeah, so there's different kind of, as I understand it, there's different paths and there's different gods, there's different ideas. So it seems like Kali is
Yes,
one sort of manifestation or one sort of, there's like different epithets of Shiva. When like one
yes,
epithet where he's
yes,
playful, one where he's a destroyer and he's gentle, all these different things. So it seems like Kali
yes,
is
yes,
kind of one epithet of that cosmic kind of entity who is
yes.
manifesting in a that kind of devouring kind of way.
Exactly right. I mean, when you think of the Abrahamic God, you have a God that's just, rational, ordered, structured, and often quite paternal, like kind of like a ruler or a king, yes? In Hinduism, you have similar models. God is the father or God is the king. We have in mind, say, Vishnu, who is like God in this most like royal way. But Shiva, when we think of Shiva as like a Hindu deity, he's kind of antithetical to the Abrahamic view of God. You know, like Shiva is not a god of order or justice or structure. Shiva is just as likely to bless demons as he is to bless gods. He like plays both sides. In his non-duality, he includes the full spectrum of reality. He can't be considered good, neither can he be considered bad. He defies all dichotomies such as morality, immorality, good or bad. And more importantly, he's a kind of deadbeat god who hangs out in the cremation ground, smoking hash all day, absorbed in his own inner bliss, seemingly checked out from the processes of creating, maintaining, and destroying, which are all functions attributed to a sovereign, regal father god. You see, so Shiva is a weird god. He's a strange model for theology. And so Tantra, although there are Buddhist forms and Vaishnava forms, Tantra more often than not refers to a Shaiva movement, meaning a tradition within the Shaiva religion where we interact with Shiva usually in ritualistic ways. Now, in that tradition called Tantra, we started understanding Shiva in different ways, and one way, as you rightly pointed out, is as Kali. We claim that Shiva is essentially Shakti, and when we say Kali, we're referring to a particular reading of reality, which in our tradition we think is spiritually nourishing, which contrasts, of course, from another reading of Shiva that might emphasize a different aspect of his infinite personality. So all of this is within Shaivism. It's all just readings on Shiva, and Shiva here understood as consciousness, we choose to depict as Kali for certain reasons that we can get into. But you're right, it's a reading on Shiva, and it's a very atypical and unique and interesting kind of theological approach.
Interesting, interesting, yeah. So
Mhm.
oftentimes Kali is depicted, as the devourer is depicted very in a very scary fashion. So
Yeah,
what do you have to
exactly.
say about people who look at that and are like frightened or, kind of turned off by it?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, a lot of people go to God for safety and security, right? They approach God and they say, "Oh Ma," or "Oh Shiva," or "Oh Vishnu," or "Oh God, oh Lord, give me money." You know, they want to feel safe, so they pray to God for money. Or they go to God and they say, "Oh God, protect my loved ones." Or they go to God and say, "Oh God, make sure there's peace in my country and my political institutions protect me and make sure that my taxes are lower this year." You know, like most people pray for the preservation of the construct that they take themselves to be, namely the ego. They want their world to be safe and secure. But if we've learned anything at all in spiritual life, it's that it's those things that destabilize the ego, that destruct the concepts of who I think I am, that destabilize the world. It's these things that make for true spiritual transformation. It is only in devastation, ruin, and destruction that the spirit seems to really shine forth. The Sufis kind of exemplify this mood of ecstatic, heartbroken mystic. So when we worship Kali, we're saying, I can't ask for money because she has no pockets. She lives in the cremation ground. She reminds me that I'm going to die. So all my ambitions in the world are just so vain. Vanity of vanities. I want to learn and be a great scholar. I want to make money and have a savings account. I want to be beautiful and young and healthy. For what? Ultimately, this body will become 3 pounds of ash. Ultimately, the world will become nothing but ash. Time devours all. So Kali, as time, the all devourer, is a living symbol for the futility of my ambitions and aspirations as a human being. She's the divinization of all misery and suffering in my life, which I am now recognizing as spiritually beneficial and nourishing, which I am now welcoming. So we say it's a very special and mad type of person who worships Kali, someone who wants spiritual transformation above all, who is not interested in worldly success, but who's interested in recognizing something beyond the world. So they come and say, I dare to love misery. I dare to dance the dance of destruction. I dare to hug the very form of death. I accept the loss of my loved ones. I accept financial ruin. I accept physical destabilization. And I accept psychological dismantling. Ultimately, what I want, Kali can give, and she can give it quickly and dramatically. And I just want it now. So that's the kind of God that Kali is. Apocalyptic God, a God of revelation, spiritual transformation, a God of renunciation.
Right. I think that so that destruction doesn't just represent, general destruction, but it can oftentimes represent destruction of the ego, destruction
That's
of all of those material desires in the material world.
exactly that. Nothing needs to change in the external world, but the influence of Kali is internal. It's a sense in which I'm no longer able to identify with that external construct called the ego. And usually, I think when people worship Kali, they're not to say inviting tragedy into their life, but they're tuning themselves to the value of tragedy. So I think it does happen in many people's lives when they come to Kali sadhana that things go wrong for them. They lose loved ones, they fall ill, or they become psychologically destabilized. And we say that this is how Kali sadhana works. We're inviting in one way, shape, or form, or at least choosing to notice all these, let's say, destructive aspects, which you're right, is entirely internal, but can sometimes also be nourished by external circumstances, like the loss of a spouse or the loss of a house or like the loss of a pet mouse or something. Kali takes things away. And by taking things away, she shows us that we never needed them in the first place.
Yeah. If everything is Brahman, everything is consciousness. There's lots of shlokas, I think, about that, or I don't know the correct term, but um, and so if that's true, then all of this destruction, all of these, all the aspects we need to see as the divine. That's how we transform them. When somebody dies, or when somebody, there's no need to grieve. If we see that as the consciousness moving to another form, that's the destructive, that's the dissolving, all of that. Very
Yes.
interesting.
In the Bhagavad Gita, this is indeed Sri Krishna's first teaching to Sri Arjuna. He says, no one is killed and no one is the killer. He who thinks he is the killer and he who thinks he is killed, both are ignorant of the truth, O Arjuna. And the claim here is that you're right, it's all just consciousness, and consciousness is transforming into this or that form. The death of the body is not the end of consciousness. It's just a transmutation of consciousness from one form into another. There is no destruction. There is only transformation and reanimation and representation. So you're right. Kali Puja, Kali sadhana, that is a spiritual practice which uses Kali as its central image, is typically going to feature things like animal sacrifice. It's going to feature like violent imagery like war and death and beheading. All of that is there to emphasize that death is not something to be feared, but something to be accepted. Violence, sex, all of these things are not dark aspects to be rejected, but embraced, harnessed, and redirected. So there's a kind of macabre mortuary symbolism to Kali, a kind of death narrative that we find with her. I mean, given the skulls and the bones and the cremation grounds and the severed head and the weapons. And like that's part of our sadhana, to embrace death and say, there's no death for one who has already died. So the worshipper of Kali sits in the cremation ground and meditates on this goddess. He smears himself with ash as if to represent the death of the body. He turns his mind away from all those projects and ambitions that might interest a human being, and he sits far beyond the reaches of polite society and meditates in filth and impurity, transcending all dichotomies upon his goddess, representing the ultimate catastrophic, apocalyptic principle of transmutation.
Yeah, that's definitely wild. Like compared to a traditional like Christian, for example, path, like it's totally on the other end, and it's exciting in some ways. And um, so how long have you been on the spiritual path? So you started this when you were young. You learned about all this stuff. Did you always take it seriously, or did you kind of was there some point when you started making TikToks and getting deeper into your practice, or have
That's a
you
good question.
always
I
kind of
mean,
been yeah?
yeah, I've had it around, but I think I was nine maybe when I was like kind of formally initiated into the tradition. When I took my mantra into the Shaiva tradition and like started maybe more seriously practicing. Like that's when my grandfather took my education maybe a bit more seriously, and I started to learn Tamil tantras. But you're right, like it wasn't really my thing until I watched Star Wars, and then I was like, wait, these Jedi, like they're just yogis. And then like the George Lucas reinterpretation of my tradition made my tradition sexier to like the 10-year-old, 11-year-old boy that I was. So I think like Star Wars and like Lord of the Rings, and even Nightmare Before Christmas, which had a very Shiva flavor to it. All of these were like modern cultural experiences of my tradition, which helped me reinvest in the value of that tradition. But you're right, it wasn't until I was 16 that I actually started to take it seriously. No, that's not really true. And when I was 14, I visited an ashrama. I went into the bookstore, and of my own accord, I picked up a Bhagavad Gita. That was my first Bhagavad Gita, and my first attempt at studying a spiritual text on my own. My grandfather would not have taught me the Bhagavad Gita. That's not really within the Shiva world necessarily. So it's like, extracurricular reading, but I remember distinctly being 14 and on my own accord, like of my own accord, picking up that book. And then for the entire afternoon, while my parents were napping or something, having that like Indian afternoon siesta, I like just devoured that book cover to cover with the Swami Chinmayananda commentary, I think. So that was my own volition. I remember being personally invested in that project. And then when I was 16, that's when I started doing sadhana seriously. From 14 to 16, I was starting to read on my own and read outside of what my grandfather was showing me. But by the time I was 16, that's when I was doing my own sadhana, when I was like doing sadhanas that I found in books, when I was doing mantras that I hadn't gotten from my grandfather, stuff like that. So I think, yeah, my quest started when I was 16, but I didn't teach it at all. I just practiced, and I practiced Western ceremonial magic for a little while, between the ages 19 and 24, because I just wanted to see what that was about and compare it to my own home tradition. I studied philosophy, and I was really into like Plotinus and like Neoplatonic stuff and early Christian themes, like Gnostic themes from the first, all of that stuff, right? But it was only when I was like in 2020, I think, when I was about like 23 or something, my grandfather died. And when he kicked his body, I didn't know that he had kicked his body, but that night I had a particular dream, Dharma. And in the morning, after that dream, which we don't really need to go into, I just had this desire to teach, as if to pass on what he had given to me. And so, weirdly enough, serendipitously, that COVID hit, and a friend of mine was like doing a yoga teacher training, and it had to be shut down because of COVID. So she started this like online Zoom yoga studio called Stay Home Yoga, and she asked me if I wanted to come and teach some postural yoga because I've been practicing that quite intensely. And I asked her if it would be okay if I just talked about philosophy instead. So 2020, every Monday, 9 p.m. on Zoom, I would just like discuss the Yoga Sutra or some kind of preliminary text like that, Bhagavad Gita, and that's how it got started. And since then, I've been making content, videos, TikToks, etc. But not until 2020. Before that, I just wanted to be a rock and roll musician, playing in metal bands and stuff. I had no desire to be a quote unquote spiritual teacher, and even now, I don't think I'm a spiritual teacher. I just like passionately want to share what I learned from my grandfather and what that inspired me to learn on my own, and how it's benefited me in my life is something that I really want to share with others, just for fun. There's no other reason than because I like to talk about what I like to talk about.
Yeah, so there was two kind of things that I found very interesting, which was the that you said was the ceremonial magic and the posture. So was that a big thing you kind of got into, or was it very brief? Or maybe you could say a little bit more
Yeah,
about
when I
the.
was like, I was just reading a bunch of stuff, right? And then like I came across Hatha Yoga as a tradition. My grandfather had practiced Hatha Yoga actually when he was younger. He had a guru, and it was part of the Ramakrishna movement. Actually, my grandfather and my father both took classes at the Vivekananda Center down the road or something. So they had practiced Hatha Yoga, and my father especially was very invested in pranayama. He's a medical doctor, an allopathic doctor, but he's done a lot of research into like, Ayurvedic forms of treatment, especially pranayama, like breathing and things like that. So I knew that they had an interest in it, but they never like imposed it upon me. But I, of my own accord, like just stumbled upon these Hatha Yoga texts, like Gorakshanath texts and texts within our Kaula tradition. And I was just like, this stuff is so cool. And when you're a 16-year-old boy who's like excited about athleticism and moving and dancing and jumping. Like Hatha Yoga seems to be the coolest form of spirituality because I get to put my body in all these positions. I can stand on my head, and there are all these promises of immortality and magic. Oh my God, I just love the alchemical language that Hatha Yoga used, like the serpent rising in the central column and biting the moon that is in the center of the brain, which then dispenses this nectar of immortality, which gives a person spiritual powers, occult powers. All that stuff was cool to me. And so Hatha Yoga was appealing to my 16-year-old mind. That's why I was doing intense Hatha Yoga. Like I would do 5-6 hours of asana a day and like all these pranayama things. I was really in that world for a while. And then I was really in the Raja Yoga world for like years and years and years. I would just like, my whole thing was just concentration, meditation for hours at a time, just concentrating on like something like in the yogic sense, light or a mantra or an image of a deity or something. That time I was very intense in mostly that. Now, of course, I've developed a little bit into more contemplative forms of spirituality, and of course more devotional forms of spirituality, like tantric ritual worship, singing, chanting, dancing, of course also praying, having a personal relationship with God. These things are way more important in my practice now as opposed to when I was like 16 up till when I was 23, when it was all about like contorting the body and holding the breath and achieving mystical states through manipulating the mind in this or that way.
So do you have a favorite mantra now that you've kind of, over your years of practice?
Yeah, I think these days, of course, when I was growing up, there are like certain mantras in the Shaiva tradition that are considered central. Usually these are secret though, so they're often given in strict privacy between the guru and the student. And that mantra is attributed to a particular deity, and the tantric student or Shisha, the disciple, then commences the spiritual practice called Upasana, where every day she worships the goddess in the form of a tantric ceremony. She perhaps performs fire ceremonies to purify the mantra. And most importantly, she systematically repeats the mantra until the mantra becomes a living experience of the deity to whom the mantra is ascribed and of which the mantra is synonymous. So therefore, like the mantra is very secret because it's very sacred and very private. So one cannot share in this tradition the mantra that they were given by their guru. Even though it's a public mantra that everybody knows, it's considered uncouth to reveal it publicly because it's a matter of deep, intimate, and personal relationship, you see. So I couldn't tell you what mantra I chant right now, but I can tell you this. These days, I really love the phrase Jai Ma. Of all the phrases in Hinduism, across the board, I've never found a phrase that appeals to me more than Jaima. It means victory to the goddess. And by the goddess, we mean everything that appears within consciousness, which is none other than consciousness itself. So if horror comes into my life, we say Jaima. If something beautiful comes into our life, we say Jaima. If something mundane or inscrutable comes into our life, we say Jaima. I have not found a mantra which is more versatile and flexible, which has more range of expression than Jaima. So these days, all day long, I'm talking to people, moving this way, that way, doing puja. I find myself saying that a lot. Jaima, Jaima, Jaima Kali, Jaima. That's my favorite mantra now.
Hmm. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's nice to have some sort of greeting or just some sort of way to interact with the world that kind of maintains that spiritual energy, that spiritual vibration as you're doing your daily activities.
Yeah,
Um,
I say it to people who are not even part of the tradition who have no idea what it means. I say it to like random people on the street, and like they almost always understand the sentiment or the feeling behind the statement. It's almost like it's like a positive affirmation of what is. When I say Jaima, I'm saying yes to reality, yes to this. And that feeling comes through even if you don't know what the word Jaima means. So I think when I say Jaima and I just like Jaima to somebody who doesn't know what it means, they smile a bit. They accept it as like a kind of positive affirmation of reality. So I think it's a universal statement, Jaima.
do you think the modern world is making this stuff easier or harder? Like, maybe in the past, there's some things that I've noticed that in the past it might have been easier for me to like repeat my mantras if I didn't have all this social media, all this technology. But on the other hand, without all this technology, I wouldn't be able to have learnt about, the massive library of spirituality that is
Precisely.
so what do you think about what
Yeah,
do you
there
think
was
about
a time
the
in history where if you were like born in Tibet, the only form of spirituality you had access to was maybe the Tibetan form of Buddhism. It's very unlikely that you would hear about the Eucharist or the Christian Gnostic tradition. It's very unlikely that you would like, I don't know, learn Sikhism or Islam or Sufism. You only had access to that cultural, socio-political response to truth called religion, which was present in your village at that time. And many villages in India, there's like only one deity who's represented. Like maybe there's a Shiva temple and that's it. And you will never hear about Vishnu or Krishna. You might never hear about Narasingha or Radha. So I think in the world of antiquity, there's less globalization, there's less of an opportunity for a person to be exposed to diverse ideas. In one sense, that's good, because then they can go very deep into the tradition that's there. They don't spread themselves thin over many different traditions, trying to study everything superficially without ever going into any one tradition meaningfully. Like back then, that was the advantage. But I much prefer a world where a person has choice. I think choice empowers agency, and we live in a globalized world where a person now born in Lhasa or Kathmandu can become a Sufi if they have access to the internet at least, or a library at least. A person can become a Vaishnava who grew up in a Shaiva village, or a Shaiva who grew up in a Vaishnava village. That's so cool to me, and I think the diversity of religions in the world is increasing. There are more religions now than there ever were in history. Like since the Christ, I think 45,000 different sects of Christianity have emerged. That's awesome. To me, the fact that there are 45,000 different ways to understand the Christ is a testament to the depth and value of the Christ's message. Like that there's so many different schools of Buddhism. As we move forward in time, there seems to be a diversification and a proliferation of traditions. And not only that, there seems to be increasing access to the menu or to the buffet of spiritual life. And I think those are very positive things. So because we're all different, we're all going to respond to truth differently. And so being presented with so many different articulations of the same thing, all at our fingertips, I think generally on the whole a positive thing. There's just more spirituality, like per square, like meter, I think, in this world, especially in the digital world, than there was at any other time in history. So for me, I love the fact that there's like decentralization of authority. Like people can now access tantras for themselves. Back then, if you wanted to read a tantra, you would first of all have to be born into a particular cultural climate. You had to be a Brahmin, most likely a Brahmin male, and you had to have the good fortune of a Sanskrit education. Only then would you be able to read the tantras at all, which were only in Sanskrit. And more importantly, unless you like made the acquaintance of a guru, you would never even access those texts because those texts were physical, like hard copies that the guru had in his or her, most likely his personal collection. So you might spend years mopping a floor or something before the guru felt like you were worthy enough to even look at the text. So this kind of like monopoly of truth, this exclusivity, this locking out of members of society along caste lines or gender lines, I think that's changed a lot. Now I don't need a guru to access a tantra. There's a downside to this, but the positive thing is that people are empowered to like just pursue truth and come into contact with primary sources, which many times are translated into like Brazil, the Portuguese. Like you can be in Brazil and read a tantra in Portuguese, or you could be in Spain and read a tantra in Spanish. That's so cool to me. That there's like a decentralization and a mass redistribution of spiritual knowledge, which in the past was hoarded by a small group of people. So that to me is positive. And I think when we move into the future, we move into diversity, we move into empowered choice, we move into decentralization of authority and a possibility of more interest and inspiration in spirituality, which I think is on the whole a good thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting now how, you'll find Christians, so many Christians in India, and now you'll find so many yogis in the Americas. It's like everything has
Yes.
kind of melded together, and I think that understanding of different traditions has enriched many people's spiritual paths and have allowed people to explore mysticism, like the inner teachings of all these religions and all these ideas. So it's definitely interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see where things are going to be going in the next few years
Yeah.
or next few decades as this kind of globalization progresses. So
You made an interesting point actually about mysticism, because you're right. Like if I look at mystics of any tradition, they resemble mystics of every other tradition. Like a madman of God in the Sufi tradition is going to look a lot like a very advanced yogi, who's going to look a lot like a Christian mystic, who's going to look a lot like a Kabbalistic Judaic master. Like there's a way in which having all the traditions in front of me can corroborate the idea of spirituality in and of itself. Like the many religions of the world, all of them corroborate religion, capital R. The many mystics all seem to all of them corroborate mysticism or spirituality. And so this corroboration, I think, lends credence to the religious life or the spiritual life and inspires people to pursue it. Because it's more of a thing when I can see that it's a thing across cultures, across times, and fundamental to the human expression of being.
so do you think everybody can be spiritual? Because,
Everybody, yeah,
yeah, like in the past, for example, there were many people who didn't have access to spiritual texts,
exactly.
texts, Or, you know, there's probably
Exactly.
many people in Africa right now who don't have time to do spiritual practice, or who that's not open for them. So do you think it's everybody can be spiritual?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, like, there's no practicality to spirituality. Like, when a person decides to be sincerely and avowedly spiritual, it's almost as if their life becomes impractical in the eyes of the world. So there's no like amount of money that you need to save up before you have the safety, the financial security to become spiritual. You know, people have given up immense fortunes, like say Saint Francis. He's a rich aristocrat in Italy, and he gives up his family inheritance to become a monk. And people have walked away from abject poverty, you know, to become spiritual. Like, people heed the call, whatever their financial situation is. And more importantly, like, it's something that's entirely personal and subjective and mysterious. So like, somebody could be really busy in their life, have so many things to do, and be deeply spiritual, because deep down inside they feel like the true value in their life is when they sit to meditate or when they read spiritual texts. And so their mind is not really in their various duties and functions. They might be a CEO of a multinational company, but they might be more likely to walk away from all of that, or they might be more likely to value spirituality, as opposed to someone who maybe is free, maybe somebody who is financially I don't know, provided for, or who has time and leisure. That person mysteriously, even though they have the time and means, might not be interested at all in spirituality. They might just be whiling away their hours at the arcade. They might not have any inner desire to read texts or sit in meditation. So it's mysterious. It's not like socioeconomic factors or political factors have ever really mattered that much for spirituality. At all times in history, people have walked the spiritual path, coming from all kinds of backgrounds, you know. So given that, there's just a kind of subjectivity and grace and mystery to all of this that makes political, socioeconomic, and cultural considerations secondary.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I mean, the whole point of spirituality, right, is to go beyond the material. So to say that we
Exactly.
need any material circumstances to as a foundation is kind of
Exactly.
opposite. Um,
Yeah, nothing in life can prepare you for spirituality, but in one sense, all of life does nothing but prepare you for spirituality. And when a person decides to take the plunge, it's going to be completely random, I think. Some people will do it when they're 80, some people when they're 8. And that's why we introduce the theory of past lives and reincarnation. We say every soul is uniquely on their own journey. And at certain times, that soul just stops becoming interested in the projection and maintenance of the ego and starts becoming interested in the dissolution of that ego, as if to intuit like something deeper and richer, which just comes upon you at a random time in your life, whether you're in college or as a CEO or as like an old man or a young woman or something. It just comes upon you, and then the degree to which you feel that call is the degree to which you walk away from the world and plunge into spiritual life. So such people who have very sincere and very deep interest in spirituality, they tend to be like all about it, like their whole life from the morning to evening. Like, their whole life is about spirituality. Some of these people join monasteries, they become monks and nuns, but in India they don't even need to do that. They usually just, like, in a very unofficial, unorthodox way, just sit by the bank of the river and do spiritual practices all day long. They're like no longer interested in making money. We call these people sadhus, and we say a sadhu is one in whom the spiritual call is so strong that there exists no possibility anymore for any other kind of life outside of the spiritual quest.
yeah, it seems like a lot of people think that spirituality is about giving up all of these things, giving up all the material things. But in my mind, it's more like that call, that feeling, that drive for those higher spiritual
Yeah.
attainments, or for that spiritual thirst. That's kind of what naturally causes all those material things to kind of fall away. It's
Yes.
not,
There can
yeah.
be a rich man sitting on a throne who has no attachment to his possessions, and there can be a beggar who is doggedly attached to their loincloth, right? Like, there's no external demonstration of what spirituality looks like. There are great masters like King Janaka or Marcus Aurelius who are kings, and there are also great masters like Ashtavakra who are beggars. You know, you're right to say that, like, there's no external indication of spirituality. So a person doesn't need to renounce physical things. Often they do. Like, a lot of people just like give up their jobs and give up their spouses and give up their houses and like roam about India, especially in places like Kashi. You'll see a lot of people like this. But just because they're not in a home living in the cremation ground and wearing a certain like color cloth, and just because they're like sadhus or whatever, doesn't mean they have spiritual power. Like, some people are disguised as yogis and live a worldly seeming life. Other people look like yogis and inwardly are entirely worldly. So you're right, there's no external way to say this person has renounced or this person has not renounced. It's entirely internal. But often you'll see that a person who is interested in spirituality, when you talk to them, their conversation will drift towards that. Or they will be uninterested in conversations that pertain to practical, mundane things. You'll find that they become abstracted or distracted when you talk about things like that around them. You'll find that what they like to do with their time is is contemplate God or read spiritual text, or you'll find that they move towards communities that do kirtan or puja or something like that has spiritual nourishment. Like they'll just like seemingly be pulled towards that. So whether they're a householder or a monk, whether they're wearing a certain kind of cloth or not, whether they're married or not, like there's something that changes in the way they spend their time, in what they think about, and in the way they show up in the world. So of course, selflessness and compassion, the decentering of the ego, and the admission of God in everything as everything, that I think is a sure sign, whether or not a person is renounced or not renounced. Selfishness is materiality and unselfishness is spirituality. And wherever we see that unselfishness, love and compassion expressed, there is a spiritual person. Whether or not they believe in God, that's all unimportant. It's just that manifestation, I think, in the lived experience of that person that matters.
So for somebody who's getting into all this, who's kind of starting off on the spiritual path, do you have any pieces of advice for them, or maybe some direction for them?
And not at all, because I mean, who am I to say? Because what's true for me will not be true for someone else. The only real advice here could be to trust your heart, to just go with what interests you. There's like a Coleman Barks translation of Rumi that I like, which phrases this instruction like as the following: allow yourself to be drawn by the strange pull of that which you love most. And I don't think it even needs to be so dramatic as that which you love most. Just that which interests you. If somebody is interested in Aleister Crowley or Thelema or Western ceremonial magic, or if somebody's interested in Zen Buddhism, if there's even so much as an inkling of an interest in something, they should just follow that, whatever that thing is, and start from where they are. Get whatever book they can find about it, read as much as they can, figure out some practices, do those practices on their own until they find a community and a teacher. Basically, everyone's path is going to look different, and therefore no one can comment on anyone else's path except to give them encouragement and license to do it their way. So my only advice to anybody would be to this effect: just do it your way. Like, let your heart guide you, follow your own inspiration. That's always more valid, I think, than taking other people's opinions about things, because that's true for them, but it might not be true for you.
Yes, very well said. Um, there's this. I like this idea that there's many paths up the mountain. I do think that maybe not every path is a path up the mountain. Like if you like banged your head against the wall for like a day, like you might not become enlightened. But I do think that
True.
there are many different paths, and so for you to kind of go and explore that for yourself is going to kind of allow your if you allow your soul to guide you, it's going to kind of fit into
Right.
the place which it's meant to fit into. Um,
Yeah, maybe there's no wrong path, just the scenic route, perhaps. Like maybe banging the head was quintessential to that person's discovery of the path that takes them to the summit. And maybe there are different summits. Maybe it's not all different paths leading to the same truth, but different paths leading to different experiences of the same truth. And so one might walk a path, get to a summit, and then maybe walk a different path and get to a different summit, and maybe ford their own path and discover a new summit that no one else ever discovered before. I think that's available in God and available in spirituality. I would also add to this, though, that if we expect joy and peace and blessedness and freedom from spiritual practice, then the means must resemble the ends. I think it's very weird to expect to get freedom if the means for freedom is bondage. So, in other words, if spiritual practice is like a labor, if it's hard, if you have to grit your teeth, if spirituality makes you grumpy and cold and upset, then for whatever reason, I think that's like misaligned. Like my intuition is that a spirituality that doesn't feel good to practice and do from day to day is probably not going to result in any end worth pursuing. Like I think if the end is freedom, the means must be freedom. So when you practice, while you're practicing, you must feel free, as if like it's worth practicing for its own sake, whether or not you get quote unquote enlightenment or the vision of God or like whatever. So whether or not you get to the summit, I think is secondary. I think the feeling of walking the path should feel like a summit to you. You can't reach the summit if the means are different from the ends. You can't be free if your means are bound. So I think spirituality should not be an attempt to get something, but an expression of something that is already there. Joyful and cheerful practice to me constitutes spirituality. Grumpy and cold and uncaring practice seems to me to be an egoic, effortful attempt to articulate some kind of conception, which arguably is the very thing that keeps us from the truth that is always revealing itself beyond all thought constructs, beyond all conceptions, beyond all expectations, and beyond all form.
Beautifully said. I really liked what you were saying about the summits, because I think that that divine entity, that consciousness, it's infinite and it's infinitely expressing. So of course there has to be different summits and different paths, and perhaps, like you said, you can find your own summit. some summit that has never
Yeah.
been summited before, because in that infinite expanse of spirituality, and maybe, you know, the people watching this, maybe there's somebody who's going to create a whole new religion, or, you know, who knows what. So it's just an unfolding of that bliss, that love, that peace, that joy, that inner seeking, and you can create something potentially new out of that if you're really disciplined. Probably, I mean, it's the infinite that
Yes.
we're calling upon. So um,
Yeah, and there are 45,000 at least sects of Christianity. How wonderful. And there'll be many more in the years to come. How many more sects of Buddhism will be discovered? How many more articulations of Shankara and of Abhinavagupta? How many new ways to worship Kali and think of Kali and experience Kali? Like, it's exciting to think that the book of religion has been written up to a point, but the pages remain blank for us to like add our own contributions based on our own way of relating to reality and our own way of then embodying reality and our own way of expressing reality. So we say, may every individual be a religion unto themselves, a sect unto themselves. May no one judge anyone else by their own standards. May each be recognized as great, each in their own place. And may all religions flourish. May all sects diversify. May all people be free to do whatever they want and express their love for God however they want without any censure and without any guilt, shame, or fear.
wow, I think that's a pretty good place to end the interview. I mean, that was a pretty good closing. So thank you so much for coming on, Nish. That was awesome.
It was so fun,
Yeah,
G. Thank you.
yeah, and for everybody who's watching, as always, Ad Astra. Namaskar.